Go ahead, Gerald.
Gerald Marsiski. I go by Jerry, by the way. Marsiski, don't look at the spelling, three simple syllables. I'm here for the first time. I have only been in Hilo for 3 years now. In process, I came across a young woman who I was very impressed by her ability to attack the environmental problems. My background is over 50 years in environment, safety, and health issues, educator, engineer, and manager. So that got me interested. Started looking at what was going on, and got in particular interested in what's happening with the water. The condo I live in sits right on the water, so we're right there. I would like to be able to swim in the water, but too many times that's not possible because of the amount of effluent that ends up in the water. So that's why we're here. We want to see what is being proposed, and especially signage. The issue today is signage. I was amazed that signs are not posted at the locations where you enter the water. I see young children going out to swim in the water on days when I know they should not be in the water. So we need some way to communicate, and communication, the way it's been done up to this date, is totally inadequate. I don't know what they're going to propose today. I'll find out. Mahalo. Thank you.
My name is Armon Coleman, ARMON COLLMAN. I'm here as with Jerry to hear what the proposals are, the communications are with regards to brownwater events. I want to give you a little background on myself. I'm a retired municipal employee from the city of Portland. I've been here for 6 years. My job with the city of Portland for 27 of my 32 years was a mechanical maintenance planner in environmental services. And I have to say that there were a number of things that I was proud of with what our bureau did with regards to wastewater and for spills, because I understand there's not only mechanical failures, there's also failures by employees, and that's just a given. It's a human factor. We know that. But the thing that I don't understand is, particularly here in Hawaii, where tourism, who takes a brunt of a lot of criticism, but a lot of people come over here for the water activities. And so many of our own local folks are out on the water, not just on the weekends, but during the daytime, whether they're fishing or whether they're out swimming. And that includes a lot of kids. And I agree with Jerry in that we're worried about kids, but I also worried about folks my age, because those of us that are older have weakened immune systems. And one of the things that I was probably the most proudest of my time at Portland is how progressive the Bureau of Environmental Services was. And the things that we did, and then I can recall 20 odd years ago when they set up their programs for brownwater advisories. We had signs that were put up everywhere. And I'm not sure how the lab works here, but I know in Portland we had field workers who did sampling, but they were also available to use to put up signs when brownwater advisories were necessary. And I know one of the things that I won't say impressed me, but was somewhat concerning, was just how small of our community is serviced by our wastewater treatment plants. That's a whole nother issue, and we could get onto that for that. But for me, the thing that I want to hear today is the proposals, what the department plans to do for signage and really getting out and allowing our public to know what's going on. Thank you.
Communication 1094 requests a presentation by the Department of Environmental Management
Department of Parks and Recreation, and Civil Defense Agency regarding their respective protocols on brown water advisories from Councilmember Aaron Chung dated September 21st, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. Chung?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And, I wanted to thank Council Chair Poindexter for allowing us to have this breached. I mean, I think it was important for us to have it in Hilo in as much as all of our resources, our county department heads are here in Hilo. If not, we would have had to have done it via video conferencing in Kona. So thank you very much. Over the last few weeks after Hurricane Lane, and particularly before that, we've been getting a lot of inquiries about our brown water protocol. Now, maybe to address the gentleman from Portland and as well as Jerry, we're not here to. The intent today is not to provide any proposals or offer any proposals right now. There may be things that come out later on, but this is simply to just explain to the public and you and us so that we can further explain to the public what the protocols are when there are situations that may create an unsafe, make it unsafe for people going to our recreational areas, particularly the beaches. So that's the scope of what we're going to be doing today. But hopefully we can maybe get our protocol better if need be. There's one thing though, we distributed all of this to the council members. This is materials from the Department of Health. Now we invited them here and they're under no obligation to come here, but they're really a key piece in all of this. I think we'll see after we listen to our departments. And I don't know, I don't think they prepared this for our meeting. It seems to be just some stock explanation as to what their protocol is pertaining to response to sewage spills, brown water advisories, and the Hilo sewage spill. It didn't come with any letterhead or any explanation. I don't really know who it came from, quite frankly, but it came from the Department of Health. And it does explain what their protocol is. With regard to sewage spills, whoever's in control of that sewage system, and I think in this situation it would be the County of Hawaii. They would make a report, and then the Department of Health would do something. And then of course with brown water advisories, whenever you have flash flood warnings, it's kind of just read it at your leisure, but take it for what it's worth. But this triggers some other action on the part of the departments of Parks and Recreation, perhaps environmental management, and maybe civil defense. And we have those three departments here today. And so if you guys could just come up and explain to us what happens when you get notice of some water contamination. We have Maurice, Roxy, Bill, and Talmadge. Talmadge, I don't know how much you have to offer on this one, but you may as well come up too. And really, again, this is not to put any of you guys on the spot or anything like that. It's just to get information out as to what we do to protect the public.
Hey, Bill Kucharski, Director, DEM. This is a hard one for the county to respond to because this is totally and completely a Department of Health issue. Department of Health does not have any statute or regulatory basis for declaring a brown water alert. They do it when there's excessive rainfall, and for this, just for example, during Hurricane Lane, there were 5 alerts that Department of Health put out, and they came in, and it was August 22nd and 23rd, there was a brown water alert for Hawaii County. August 23rd to 28th, there was a general statewide alert, brown water alert. From the 24th to the 27th of August, there was Hawaii County spill advisory. And on the 28th to September 4th, there was still a Hawaii County alert for brown water. And when you take a look at the flows that we had in the rainfall from Lane, you can understand why there was an alert. Now, we had spills during that event because of the amount of rainfall that came down. It just overwhelmed our system. And we responded. We had the reports, and we sent 3 separate spill reports as required by code and by HAR regulations to Department of Health. The brownwater alert is not ours. We just respond to it. And what that says is for residents to stay out of the water. It says that Department of Health is advising the public to stay out of streams, coastal, and standing waters that are contaminated by stormwater. Stormwater may contain harmful microorganisms from overflowing cesspools or septic tanks, as well as animal waste washed into streams and storm drains. That is the extent. This says don't go into the water. And this last brownwater alert was lifted on the 4th of September. Our last spill was the 25th of August, so that was full 10 days after there were any discharges, or we'll call it spill. And so there's really not much I can say. We're not authorized to call a brownwater alert. We're not obligated to do anything about a brownwater alert. We are not authorized to establish or do anything with that information other than acknowledge that the state has done that.
When the state issues that brown water alert, are there any signage protocols that go into place from the departments, maybe of Parks and Recreation? I know the man from Portland, brought something up about that. I mean, we should be warning.
This is I don't mean to sound like it's not our responsibility, but that is defined by the state. The state is the one that states whether, gives the indication when an area needs to be posted and signage placed. And frankly, I wouldn't know where to put any signage for a brownwater alert if it's for the entire island. Where do I post?
No, but maybe not just you, but the Department of Parks and Recreation. You guys have any input on this? So tell me, do you want to say something?
Good afternoon, Thomas Mango from Civil Defense. Usually what Department of Health does is, if it's a specific area, they'll post it. But like Bill was saying, that the entire island, on this past incident, the entire island was under brown water advisory. So they just left it at that as far as public notice. Otherwise, they felt that they'd have to go sign the whole island.
So who issues that notice to the public? The Department of Health?
Yes, Department of Health does, and they have a website, and you can get the alerts from their website as
How
well.
about on the radio?
I hear it on the radio. I think it comes across TV as well. If they ask us, even with DM, we'll put out notices, and that'll be our extent of.
Okay, so this is solely within the purview of the Department of Health, and basically that's their responsibility to get the word out.
Yes.
Okay. Then you think, I mean, particularly maybe from Parks and Recreation, because you get kids going in beach areas and stuff. Do you think it's something that we could augment, possibly?
I think Roxy Walgen,
Yeah.
Director of Parks and Recreation, I think this is something that we can look forward to, maybe trying to work with them, maybe having signs posted. I think we need to come up with a system of how we're going to do this, what areas, and when are these signs going to be left up there forever and ever, or are they going to be taken away? Because in the past, when ever a sign is erected anywhere, we have had people complain that we're polluting the area with signage. So that's another thing that we need to be
Can I win,
concerned
yeah?
about. That's right.
Right. Okay. So, do you guys work closely, though, with the Department of Health? Is there a person, and you don't have to name names or anything, but
we work with Department of Health when we have to. It's not that we're on a daily basis kind of communication, but if this is something that the council and the county needs to look at and to better our services and make it more safer for the community, absolutely, we can do that. We can have a meeting with them and see how we can work together.
Yeah. Because I think it is causing some apprehension to a lot of people, because particularly those with kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe Maurice, you might want to share your experience during Hurricane Lane, and you kind of went over and above what your responsibilities call for. But
Aaron, let me
yeah,
expand upon that. In the instances where they put up the signs,
you mean the Department of Health?
yes,
Okay.
there are conflicts. People who say, they put up the signs, and there's people in the water. So the lifeguards won't enforce it. Nobody will enforce it. It's just a warning that there's high levels of certain bacterias. It's your decision to whether you go in there or not.
And are those? I mean, would it? I mean, would they let people into the water if it's an unsafe situation, though? I don't know what level, where
Well, it's
contamination rises to the level of being unsafe.
the signs basically. I'm not sure the exact wording, but it says to stay out of the water. So when there's sewage release, the levels could be pretty high. Depending on what your exposure is, there could be issues.
But it's not by you guys. You guys don't issue that. It's the state.
Yes, not unless DEM's had some kind of release, then DEM will do monitoring and they'll post as well.
Okay, let's kind of use a different analogy here. Let's say Portuguese man of war was kind of cruising around over there. Who determines that Portuguese man of war is out in our recreational DLNR? And they would post signs? You guys would post signs? Nobody posts signs? I see it all the time, though, in the news. They have signs, right? Don't they have signs?
Maybe for Waikiki.
Yeah. So so city and county might do something like that, but we don't.
Yeah, I don't think we have that kind of tourist or beach density.
Okay. Because I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that you guys, create a lab, to determine, contamination or anything like that. We just want to make sure that we understand what the protocols are in case certain things happen. Sewage spill, brown water, flash flooding.
So,
Do you think we could do better, though?
so it's Maurice Messina, Deputy Director of Parks and Rec. So, like Roxy was saying, we could do a lot better because what we end up having to do is we go into the Department of Health's website. We go to the Clean Water branch, and we go and we check what active alerts are there, because we do get the phone calls. People are asking us constantly, and then they ask us, well, who's going to put up the signs? And we do not put up the signs. We want to keep the citizens informed of everything that's going on, but is it just advisory level though, or is it an alert level? Because the advisory says that people should remain vigilant, and if they see brown water, stay out of the brown water area. And so we do not have the expertise to say which signs we should put up, when should we put up those signs. Like Bill was saying, where exactly should those signs be placed? I mean, is there a distance between each sign that should be put up? Is there exact wording on that sign? These are all good questions, and we want to make sure that the people at our beach parks are safe, and we want to work with these guys, but right now truthfully, we have to go and do our due diligence every time we hear that there may be brown water out there, to go see if there's a brown water advisory in effect.
Well, as I said, I anticipated this being a short presentation, just so that they could tell us what their responsibilities are and what the Department of Health's responsibilities. Anybody else have questions?
If I could, there are two different kinds of alerts. One is if we have a sewer spill. If we have a sewer spill, that's greater than 1,000 gallons, we are required to come in, notify Department of Health, post signs that there's been a release, and test. And we do have a lab that can test, and it takes 24 hours to culture the organisms that we test for. In a brownwater alert, it's not usually associated with an unauthorized release of sewage. In the case of Lane, our system was overwhelmed, and the discharges that went out were massive. When you take a look at millions of gallons, most of that water that was discharged was rainwater, but it was mixed with sewage, so we had to report the entire set. And when we did that and we had those releases, since we were still in the middle of the hurricane, still getting rain events, the Department of Health said we didn't need to post for those individual releases. But there are two types. When we have a release, we have the responsibility to post the signs where, and we let DOH know where that is, and then we need to test, and we send them the results, and they say, okay, you can remove the signs. Brownwater event is not, again, is associated with a rainfall event, not a sewage discharge event.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Poindexter?
Yeah. So I have a question, because every time we seem to have a lot of rain, we end up with a lot of sewage spills or overflows, I don't know, releases or whatever they're calling, or breakage and something. What are we doing? Are we building something else that would be able to handle more of the sewage so that it doesn't break or overspill, or I don't know, release into the, because there's times that it'll spill, times that people may purposely release. I don't know if they purposely release. I know in some areas they may purposely release. But what are we doing to safeguard from not having that happen again?
This Lane event was an extraordinary event. I know that we know there was a lot of rain, but just to give you an idea, USGS indicated Wailuku and Rainbow Falls usually is about 35 cubic feet per second is the flow. And on the morning of October or August 23rd, the flow is about 26,000 cubic feet per second. And so that kind of rain event is not something that you can design for. What we do have is we have pump stations, which means they come down wherever we're low and we need to pump up. We have a pump station. And those pump stations were overwhelmed. We had, well, some of them weren't overwhelmed. We had in Wailoa, it was normally pumps about 3 million gallons a day, and it was pumping over 20 million gallons a day on that system. And where we had our release was at the Pua pump station because that was undersized when it was originally built. We do have plans to come in and replace that with a pump station of adequate size. But even with that, we were pumping 13 million gallons a day flow rate into the sewer treatment plant in Hilo, and the remaining discharge was in excess of that. And so that's something that we can change, is to increase the size of that pump station. But on the rest, on this rain event, this is something you really can't design for. It was just overwhelming.
Yeah, and the reason why I say that is, too, that looking for a way to prevent that from happening again is because a lot of times we're having a lot of development on the Mauka lands.
Yes.
And so rainwater comes down really quick now, more than we had, in years past. If you look along the Hamakua coast, too, you see the destruction, and it's because of development now on Mauka lands, whether that be for agriculture, whatever it is. We're having a lot of movement up on those lands, and things are coming down really quick. So, but thank you for that.
Anyone else like to speak? Ms. Davis?
Oh,
Really quick, I just would like to thank Councilmember Chung because, people do call, our constituents do call during the emergencies, and I assume that it was the department or somebody, one department of the county that would be responsible for this. So I appreciate Mr. Chung having you folks here to tell us and explain to us what the procedures are and what are your roles and responsibilities. So appreciate that. I yield.
Thank you, Ms. David and Ms. Leloy.
I actually have a couple of questions because I want to figure out a way to do this a little better, separate and apart from our sewage spills, from our brown water advisory. And after the Puna event, all of the beach parks in my district is where they all go. Now, I have 11 beach parks. And so I am incredibly interested in doing a better job at notifying people what risks there may be with visiting our beach parks. So just keeping the brown water advisory in a lane, is it possible for us to utilize our message boards with Department of Public Works before they drive into Kilkaha to notify them that there is a brown water notice and to be vigilant? Is that something that we can try and do?
Maurice Messina, Deputy Director, Parks and Rec. We could, some of these brown water advisories may be up to like a month in length. So we would still have to count on Department of Health and the Clean Water Branch to tell us when we need to do it, where do we need to do it. For instance, like if it's the entire island, how do we do that part? So we could try everything. We could try everything, but it's still going to be the Department of Health that's going to tell us what we need to do and when we need to do it. Because we're not the experts in it, but we're willing to try anything.
So where do we start that conversation? Well, I mean, we really need to bridge the gap between State Department of Health and our community. And I'm sure every single council member up here has gotten a call from a constituent because the rubber meets the road with us. They call us first.
Right.
How do we bridge that gap?
Well, like Roxy said, we'll do that now.
Thank you. And maybe for Mr. Kucharski, I know this one's a little bit more complex just because it's the county's responsibility to handle our wastewater, but then we have a whole tremendous amount of oversight with the Department of Health. So can we talk a little bit about when there's a sewage spill, how that communication happens, and then how the signposting happens? And then I think the next piece to that for me is what the county can do to better alert the community of a sewage spill.
We are required to, Bill Kucharski, DEM, the department is required as the operator of sewage treatment plants to notify Department of Health whenever we have a spill or an unauthorized release. When that occurs, we have 5 days to send in a notification. Anytime it's greater than 1,000 gallons, we need to make that report. Even before we do that, we would come in when there was a release, and we would have discussions with Department of Health, and signage would be posted, and samples would be taken in the area that could, the beach areas that could be affected by that release. And that's not a precise science, but we tend to overpost if we have a release. We then come in and take samples along the beach, and we take them to the lab. We grow the cultures, and if we are below 30 colonies, I believe it's, or 100 colonies per milliliter, we then come in and they come in and say, okay, this is clear. you can remove the signage. But we have a full process when we have a specific spill. And we follow that diligently. We also required to notify all the news outlets, and we notify civil defense, and these notices are put out by all of them. We have a full distribution list for radio, newspapers, and other news organizations to let them know that this has occurred.
Yeah, we've gone through this a couple of times. When we talk about signposting and where they belong, is there a rule of thumb or is there a protocol, like every 10 feet along the shoreline, within a half a mile radius? And I'm asking this question because if we're going to take it on with our beach parks and our brown water advisory, maybe there's some four corners already available with Department of Health. So we're actually consistent that, every 30 yards or every 40 yards, there's a sign.
I'm not aware of a specific distance between signs, but generally when we post, we put them close enough that if anyone's walking down, if they miss one, they'll see another. I can't give you a specific foot distance between them, but the signs are approved by the Department of Health. It's their signage. We maintain them and we post them, and they tell us when we have to put them up, and we tell them where we've posted. They agree or disagree, and then if they disagree, we'll put more signage. They never disagree if we have too much signage, so that's not a problem. But then when the beach is cleared and the analysis shows that the beaches are not exhibiting pathogen counts higher than the standard, then we take the signs down and remove them. But it's a process that's fully coordinated with Department of Health in Honolulu.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's a way we can actually dovetail something that's already out there, as far as putting them out and taking them down when it relates to a brown water advisory. I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, again, for brown water, we don't post. There's no postage for brown water. We'll say that every rain event, you will find a higher bacterial count on your beaches because of the washdown from the soils, and so brown water is just an excessive flow.
I'm going to yield, but I do have one more question. Tell me again the flow volumes during during Lane. I'm sorry, because I'm doing the math in my head. Yeah. I'm very curious about the amount of water that was coming down the hill.
Well, this is from the USGS, and I can give you a copy of the printout. But they said that the Rainbow Falls is usually 35. That's 35.0 cubic feet per second.
Per second, okay.
And in the morning of the 23rd, they measured in the area of 26,000 cubic feet per second.
Per second.
So that's like almost a 900-time increase.
Yeah. And 7 gallons per cubic feet. That's I choke. That's choke water.
This is a record.
Yeah.
Actually,
okay.
They higher than the 1900 spill. They believe. I mean, there it was 26,030, some number.
I'm going to figure it out right now. But in the meantime, I'm going to yield. Thank you, Mr. Chung. Really, thank you. I think the Department of Health has to be at the table for this conversation to go a whole lot farther. But thank you for raising this issue for us. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Ms. Liloy. Mr. Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Bill. Actually, thanks all departments, Roxy, Mo, Talmadge. And I think what I'm hearing is that this is attempting to get arms around a public health concern. And but I think the departments are being pretty frank, but gently frank about the fact that brown water doesn't necessarily imply unhealthy water. It's turbid, but it's not actually contaminated necessarily, except when we have a sewage releasement. And the problem is we have a big island with lots of coastline. And the reality of trying to manage that as a whole, and I get it, because Kohala, we get it too. We get big rain coming off the mountain, and we'll get the coastlines pretty dark. And I don't think it's a bad concern. I think it's a very valid concern. The problem is, how do we actually manage that concern? And we have to have, and I agree with Councilwoman Leloy concerning we have to have Department of Health in there and that determination. And good point. So where do we post it? We got 300 miles plus of coastline, so where do we post it? And so a good conversation, but I think we really have to have a lot more conversation before we can get into anything. So just comments, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the department's frankness about it. I yield.
Does any other council person have comment? Seeing none, I guess it's time to call for a vote. All those in favor of filing communication 1094, please say aye. Are there any nays? No? Okay.